Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the For Goodness Sake YouTube channel. As always, I'm your host, Teklu, and today I'm coming to you with a heavy heart. Like I imagine most of you are, if you've been watching any of the coverage of the Uvalde school massacre in Texas. I have not a lot of words in one sense. To capture my emotions is probably impossible right now. Everybody I've been talking to, I've been trying to talk about how horrific this is, how horrendous it is, how unbelievable it is, yet so believable. None of that does this justice. None of it captures the sadness and the emotional pain that I just feel as somebody who's empathizing with all the people who are most directly affected, not to mention, the unimaginable pain that people who are directly in this, in Uvalde, parents, students, teachers, family members, friends of different people involved, not even just the victims of the massacre, but just people involved in general. It is truly unimaginable, and I cannot put into words that type of emotional pain and just sadness, that I imagine so many are feeling, including myself. So definitely a heavy heart that it's hard to express really what I all feel about this situation, this tragedy, with just words. In another sense, I think it's always really helpful to try and really put yourself through the exercise of understanding what you think about something, understanding what you value about something. And for me, something that always helps me is writing about it. And so today I was writing as much as I could about what I think about not just this tragedy, but obviously the greater context of mass, death events, these massacres that keep happening in America in general. And then also connected to that, gun violence in America as well, which is a much, much, much bigger, much larger percentage of the gun violence that happens in America is not mass shootings or anything like that, but it's just kind of mundane gun violence, interpersonal gun violence that happens all over the country. It's suicides, which is a huge chunk of it. And it's also then homicides just with handguns and just, whether it's the, kind of gang fighting or just, stupid young dudes get in a conflict and then one of them decides to pull a gun on the other and kill, and then a brother gets involved or an uncle or a cousin or a friend or all this. I mean, that's the much more common way that guns are used to kill people in America. And that happens a lot. And it's one of the reasons why we are the leading, rich nation in gun deaths in the world by far. While mass shootings is an issue, it's a serious issue. Obviously, we see that every time it happens in the news. It's actually a very, very, very small percentage of those greater, that larger group of gun deaths. And so I've been thinking about all that, and I have felt not confident enough at times to speak out about an issue like this, or at least just put my thoughts out there. Not even like I'm speaking out for anything, because there are so many thoughts to have. I think like most of you, I see a lot of sides of the issues. I mean, I see that it seems very clear that on the one hand, we can look at a clear correlation. America has much higher levels of gun ownership, and we have much looser gun laws than our peer nations in Europe or Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Korea, South Korea. Most of the rest of the kind of advanced, developed countries in the world don't have the same level of gun ownership that we do. And guess what? We also have this ridiculously high number of gun deaths. And it seems pretty clear that, in England, where they just go around with knives, because that's all they can get their hands on, usually, they stab people a lot more. And, it's a lot easier to, not to minimize getting stabbed by somebody, but it's a lot easier to heal from a knife wound or getting beaten, than it is to heal from a gunshot, because for obvious reasons, it's easier to die from getting shot in, various parts of your body. I see that clearly. And then on the other hand, I see the fact that it's very clear that most people who legally buy guns have very, very clear track records of having no problems, having zero violent acts, to other people. My grandfather was an avid hunter with his brothers, and they would always go this big hunting trip every year. Many of my close friends from Minnesota do that. It's just like totally not an issue. Like you would never ever think that any of them would be involved in they would never be involved in like shooting someone else and just like a normal getting upset at them and pulling a handgun out and killing them, or in a massacre style, obtaining whatever, large semi-automatic rifles, going around shooting people. Those are not the people that I'm worried about. I'm just not. So I see this balance that the United States kind of, as a whole, but each individual state and locality kind of gets itself into in terms of trying to thread the needle between creating more safety by trying to remove dangerous weapons from the hands of everybody as a whole, because it's just some people don't find it worth it to have those weapons on the street. And then I also see the side of, this is not the idea. We shouldn't be punishing people who are law-abiding citizens for the actions of these people who are already getting guns illegally, who are already, yada yada. You can go down the list. And so I haven't felt very confident, but I feel like there is something that I am confident about. Besides, I'm also not even confident about, the actual numbers on like what actually reduces mass shootings, what actually reduces gun laws, besides, literally just taking guns away, right? And I know there are some things that I think I'm very confident about, things like gun licensing structure, laws where everybody who owns a gun has to go through a license process, and it's like, we drive cars with licenses, and we can't do it without it, so why don't we do that with guns? That seems reasonable to me. I've heard that that's pretty popular amongst a lot of gun owners. I think it'd be a good idea, and I'm for it. I'm for whatever we want to do. But that kind of gets me to my point, which is I might not be confident about the individual proposals that we might suggest will reduce mass shootings or will reduce gun deaths in general. But, I am really confident that the way that I've seen people communicating on social media, especially over the past few days since this shooting happened, I am confident that that is not what I would like to see. I'm confident that I don't believe it's productive. I'm confident that we are better than that. And I hate to really I don't want to be nagging people that in the wake of a horrific, very visceral massacre of children, no less, I'm the guy coming around saying, oh, well, you need to communicate better in this way and that way. And that's not my point. I'm not trying to nitpick anybody in like an individual level and say that they need to have better emotional reactions to like a striking and disgusting thing that we all seen happen, and we were just seeing more and more stories pour out, and then add on top of that ridiculous stories about the police force, and then we already add that on top of other issues that we have with the policing in America. I mean, it's just, I'm not trying to police anybody's reactions or their communication, all right? When, some people just need to vent. Some people are not trying to be strategic in how they are talking about these issues. But I do think that at the very least, from what I've seen from elected officials on both sides of the aisle, I'm very disappointed, and I'm very upset that nobody who is an elected official chooses to take this opportunity to put aside their ideological desires and figure out what they need to do something, like literally anything, to make progress on this issue, either of mass shooting specifically, if that's all we can do, or on gun deaths in general, which have been spiking way higher than they've been in my entire lifetime. Still much lower than they were at their peak, but way higher than they've been in the past 25 years. So over the past 2 years, we've had these horrific levels of gun violence. And I am very upset that nobody's trying to get together and figuring out what we need to do to make progress on that. I feel that it's very common, and I've seen this from elected officials in tweets and in people showing up to press conferences and in speeches given on congressional floors. I've seen this very clearly, and in all forms of social media. Politicians right now have chosen to say, look at this Uvalde, I don't know why I keep calling it Uvalde. Look at this Uvalde shooting. Now more than ever, because of this Uvalde shooting, it proves that I've been right this whole time, and you need to do exactly what I've been saying. Everybody who disagrees with me is wrong, and this massacre proves it. Do what I'm saying. I'm right. Everybody tell me I'm right. You need to like my tweets and retweet them, and you need to favorite all the videos of my speech on the floor of the congressional bill. I mean, it's that's what they're taking the opportunity to do, is to shove everybody else's face in the fact that they've been right this whole time. And I think that gets at a bigger tendency kind of in our culture right now, which is like something. Like, we think something's a really big problem, right? Like, I think homelessness is a really big problem. And then something big happens to prove that, to make maybe homelessness worse, like the pandemic happens and a bunch of people lost their housing. A bunch of people, before you have rent stabilization and, rent protections, things that were implemented, a lot of people were facing this huge eviction crisis and all these things. And so then it's like we have this tendency to say, well, I already thought that homelessness was a big problem, and guess what? It's gotten even worse because of this. Look, I was right this whole time, so you need to do exactly what I say to make it better. Otherwise, you're a part of the problem, and I can't work with you, and you're just, all these bad things, you're immoral, blah, blah, blah. So we take these opportunities, these crises, and we kind of fix them into opportunities for us to prove that we were right the whole time, and that everything we think about our policy suggestions were right the whole time, and that's what we need to do going forward. And if not, well, then screw it. We can't do anything because everybody else who isn't agreeing with us is immoral and they're just bad people. And I think that that's the exact opposite way that we should be looking at these issues. If we believe something is a huge crisis, if we believe something is the most important issue to us, and that making progress on that is one of the most important things we can do, that is the perfect time. That is the perfect time to figure out whatever we can do to make any type of progress on it. And that includes making compromises with people we disagree with. If it is truly so important to us to make progress on mass shootings and on gun deaths, we need to give up our ideas of it can only be my way and the highway. If it can only be my way and the highway, nothing's going to get done. That's just the facts. It's been that way for so long. We've seen it happen so long. These shootings keep happening over and over and over. And we continued on many people, not everybody, but many people, especially these elected officials, continue to say it has to be my way. It has to be all gun control, no gun control. It has to be all the gun control that I want, none of the ones that anybody else is supporting. Or I'm not doing anything on it. And I'm telling you, it doesn't make sense. If it's the most important thing to make progress on mass shootings or on gun violence, then making a compromise to reduce those gun deaths in general by 5% instead of the 50% that you think you could do if you followed your rules. Reducing it by 5% should be a huge, huge step forward. That's progress. That's progress, and that's what we need. So, personally, my idea is I would love to have a gun licensure system. I've seen it. I've seen some research that's, Japan uses it and they have really good outcomes and people still have guns. I've seen in different states when people have moved on to it, like Massachusetts moved on to a gun licensing system and they made incredible progress on gun violence, and they, didn't just take people's guns, other states, I think there was Vermont or Connecticut or something, had a gun licensing system, and then they moved to like a background check system, and then it actually, gun violence got worse, and there's some, it's just correlation versus causation. All these researchers are really smart, and they do a lot of math to like figure out what actually like was the causation, and I don't know, I'm pretty compelled that like that would be a good idea, even if I can't prove or don't understand the math that does prove that it's like a causational relationship. Or causal relationship. That would be good to me. I personally think that banning people from buying semi-automatic rifles is a good idea, or at least making them very, 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 very hard to access for like, most people, so that only like extreme like hobbyists or something can get them, and like only in like a way, or like I don't know, doomsday preppers or something. But like only once we're able to like be sure that they're not going to I don't know how you be sure that people aren't going to use them to hurt other people, but I don't know. I mean, I just don't think that people need them, right? And I think that that's kind of where I'm at. I think background checks are good. I think people fall through the cracks all the time. This guy right here from Uvalde would have he passed his background check, got it the same day. It's like that wouldn't have stopped it, and I'm open-minded when a lot of I've heard conservative friends of mine tell me that there are a lot of these shootings, some of them would be improved with background checks and some moderate things that are, popular, but a lot of them aren't. And, something like, background checks can't just solve all these problems, even though some people like to make it out that way. But I say what I would like because I want to show that I would like to be, further to the left on gun control in terms of like restricting it, right? I would like to restrict it a little bit more than most people who happen to be on the right tend to be. Maybe most people would tend to be in the middle. I don't know. Like, I'm not super, ideological about it because I don't think that there's a lot of evidence that shows that it would just be so successful. I think that the one thing that would be successful at reducing a lot of gun violence in America would be taking guns off the street. And unless you do that, it's, we're going to have higher levels of gun violence. And so you can put background checks and you can do all these different things. With the exception of gun licensure, I think that's what I'm a little bit more convinced on, but still, there's a limit, But I say that because I want you guys to see that I will compromise on just about anything to make progress on this issue. If a conservative comes to me and says, I'm willing to do a background check and not a licensure program, but that's it. You know what? I would do it. I would do it right now. I would do it right now if we could pass it into law. Or if they said, I'm willing to fund police departments, which I think would be a great way also, giving more staff to patrolling police officers, having more boots on the ground, to prevent gun violence, which would probably not have a very huge effect on mass shootings, but would still reduce a huge amount of deaths in America. I would be down for that if they wanted to do that. If they wanted to put money into different work programs to get people off the streets in the summer and into programs where they're working and they're making money and they have better options than going to, selling drugs or something like that. I am down for it. If we can do some combination of all the above. If they say, I like gun licensures, I heard they're pretty popular with gun owners. I'm not 100% sure on that, but that's what I was told. I'm down for a licensure program, but I'm not down for background checks, and I'm not down for, taking away assault rifles or semi-automatic rifles. I'm not down for those. Let's do this instead. I'm down. My point is that I might want things way over here, but other people are over here. We can make progress in the middle, and that's what we have to. We have to come into it with a mindset. How can we get to yes? Not where are they wrong? Where I'm so right, where are they wrong? Where can I tell them, no, you're wrong? I need to prove to them, no, you're wrong so many times. We need to find a way to sit down with, and if I personally were, if I were the president or if I were some prominent senator, I would go to every single person in my caucus, whether I was right, left, independent, green, blue, purple, doesn't matter. I would go to every single person in the Senate, in the House, wherever I could. If I was in my state, I would say, what do we need to do to get to yes? Find a partner, pair up with someone who disagrees with you on this issue, write down some things that you can both agree on. You give up a little bit, they give up a little bit, get to yes. We're not leaving until we get to yes. Figure it out. That would be my approach. And that's what I think we need more of. I think that we can pressure our politicians to do that with phone calls, telling them to get to yes, calling our representatives on the local level, on the state level, and on the federal level, it makes a difference. I think that makes a real difference. But I don't think we do that because we often ourselves are not always trying to get to yes. We often ourselves are trying to show everybody how right we are. We're trying to show everybody that we got the right answer. And we're also just sometimes pissed off. This is something that pisses us off. It makes us sad. It makes us upset. Sometimes that comes out in a way that's just not worried about being right, not worried about being effective. It's just about expressing those emotions. So I'm not saying everybody has to be that way, but I'm saying that I do think a lot of people are strong enough to, I don't want to make it about strength. I shouldn't say that. I think a lot of people are able to say, dang it, I wish it could be way over here where I want it. I wish it could. But I want to make progress. So I'm gonna push to get to here instead of it being over here where it is. So I want to push you guys to do that. Challenge yourselves in your conversations with your friends, with your coworkers, with whoever in your life, your family members. Challenge yourself to stop pointing out all the ways that you guys are over here on everything. And start to see where you can agree. Start to see where you can get to yes, Look for the yeses and you will find them. Try to get to the yeses. Try to get to where you can reasonably find some common ground. And if you're also so inclined that you want to be effective and hopefully spark some change, why don't, instead of making another post about it, making another, rant on Twitter about it, like I'm known to do. I'm not hating, ranting on Facebook and Instagram about it. Put on Google your local senator, or your local state senator, or your city council members, or your state senator, your federal senator, right? Whoever it is, your congressperson. Google somebody that represents you. And say, hey, I'm a concerned citizen, and you represent me, and that also means you work for me. I want you to get to yes, too. I have to figure it out with people I disagree with every day in my life, so I need you to figure it out with people that you disagree with in your job, too. Any job you work at in America is going to have people who totally disagree with each other on a range of issues, and yet we always find a way to come together and do our jobs, and we have maybe some scuffles here, but we come together anyway, and we figure it out enough to do our jobs. We need to demand that our politicians do the same thing, and part of that is expecting ourselves to be able to kind of turn the dial down a little bit and say, this is an extremely important issue, so it's precisely the issue that it's most important to compromise on. Not because I don't think it would be better if I had my preferred policy choice, but because progress is better than the status quo. Because it needs to be better in some way, and getting 10% of the way there is better than getting 0% of the way there. So I don't always feel confident about empirical, kind of what the science says about everything, what the political science says about every single issue. And I don't know how to reduce mass shootings in, a fundamental way. I don't know. Maybe it's just that we have a really big country and I don't know. I don't have the answers in terms of what exactly the policies are. I have opinions. I think that it's good to get fewer guns on the streets and in the hands of people who often use it to kill themselves and to kill other people with, and that includes, mass shootings and just individual person shootings. I think it's good to not have that available for people. To make it harder to kill people is good, in my opinion. But I'm open-minded. And if you want to make some progress on this issue and you disagree with me, we could sit down and we could come to agreement on some things that we could do. Maybe they relate to gun laws. Maybe they relate to some other totally different issue that we think can make some progress on reducing the total number of people who die from guns and who die from mass shootings every year. These are massacres. These are massacres that don't need to happen, and they might be very, very difficult to solve. So I'm not saying we can just totally eradicate every single, issue that we have. Same thing with gun deaths. These are real issues. We should treat them like real issues, and we should make progress on them, rather than just staying so fixated in our mindset that it has to be our way or the highway, because we're never going to make progress on that then. My quote of the day today is by H.L. Mencken. He was a journalist from the early 1900s. He said, "An idealist is someone who, upon noticing that roses smell better than cabbages, the idealist determines that roses makes better soup as well." I think we need to start thinking more about our soup, the meat and potatoes that we deal with, our healthy, what's healthy in our politics, not just what ideally would be great, practical stuff, let's get our veggies in terms of our politics, like we need to do the right thing, not just have the right ideas. It's not enough to have the right ideas. We need to do the right things, and we need to make progress, not just have progressive ideas. So, smell the roses. It brings me into my last piece of advice. Get off of Twitter, get off of Facebook, get off of social media. I need to take my own advice. Go take a walk, breathe some fresh air, smell your roses, notice how they're better than cabbages. And then when you come back inside after you get some good food in you, have cabbage soup. I'm pushing this analogy a little too far, but get some good food, focused breathing, that's important, exercise, movement, do things to take care of yourself outside of just kind of scrolling through all the terrible coverage that's on about this horrible massacre right now, because it's not helpful to just be kind of doom scrolling. Sometimes you need a doom scroll, sometimes you need a vent, but find a balance for yourself, all right? My heart cannot express the pain that I have for people and what they're going through with this Uvalde massacre. My only hope is that we can come together in order to prevent it in the future. And that's not just by hoping that our opponents, ideological opponents, our political opponents, just give up their fight and their ideas and determine that we're right. We have to be the ones to lead the changes that we want to see in the world. It's just how it is. It's a responsibility that we each have to take up ourselves. If we want to see some progress, we have to be willing to sacrifice a little bit of our ideals in order to make practical and real material changes in the world. Be the change, all right? As always, peace and love. Till next time.